let's move on.
Thanks, everyone. Hello, my name is Eugene Romero, as mentioned, and I'm here to talk to you today about getting rid of pull requests. So I'm ready to see people's strong reactions on this subject. But before we begin, let's start with, first of all, who is this Eugene Romero, and why should I be telling you to get rid of pull requests, right? Well, as mentioned, I like breaking things. I am a professional breaker of things, as a matter of fact, at Capgemini. So I do consulting on my, I guess, non-spare time. I've been in the industry for 16 years. I know it's hard to believe. I know I look young as a young puppy, but no, I'm not that young anymore. So I've been in the industry for a while, been in different companies, different projects, seen different things. And I am guilty of having merged pull requests without reading through them. I know. Please don't kill me. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Am I the only one? There's at least a couple of hands. All right, good. But we're going to talk about this. We're going to see where people stand on this. So, yes, this talk is clickbait. I know the talk is called Get Rid of Pull Requests. I'm not necessarily going to tell you to get rid completely of pull requests. However, we might find a middle point that is not all the way at getting rid of pull requests, but maybe some things can be done better. And before we start talking about that, I would like to talk just a tiny bit about pull requests and what their history is, right? I think especially if you have been in the industry for not so long, to you, you might say, well, pull request is just a part of our way of working, right? It's just something that we do. However, there was a time when pull requests did not exist. There was a time when people actually got together and looked at code changes together. However, when open source became a big thing, people started contributing to open source projects from many different places in the world. This was no longer people who were sitting together in an office looking at a code base, but it might be someone who is maybe in the United States, and maybe someone who is in Germany, and maybe someone who is in Japan or in Australia or wherever, who are all contributing to this same project or code base. So there had to be a system for maintainers and owners of code bases to be able to look at these changes and be able to manage them in some way, right? So from this is that pull requests were born in this open source world. However, this was something that companies liked a lot. They saw that this was actually kind of a cool, useful thing to do. So they also started incorporating it into the workflow of their little code bases for whatever products they were building. This is why pull requests started catching more traction. And people started doing them, even if it was people who worked together in the same building or same company. Interestingly now, though, we have gone full circle, and now a lot of us maybe work remotely. So maybe the company we work for is no longer in our city, or maybe even in our country, or our time zone even. So because of this, now pull requests are again starting to become very popular. They were already quite popular, but now they are very much used everywhere, and kind of fulfilling the same original purpose of helping people in different time zones and different places to look at code changes together and decide if these code changes are safe or not safe, if they should be implemented or not. So, okay, it seems like a good system. Seems like in theory, on paper, it should work. However, I maintain that there is a fundamental problem with pull requests. And now I know what you're thinking, like, oh, there's this crazy weirdo. What's he going to tell us now? But I'm going to see if I can get you guys in the room to agree with me. So please raise your hand if any of these situations I'm going to present apply to you. So raise your hand if you dislike stopping your work to review pull requests. All right. About half the room. Surprising. I feel like some are not raising their hand, but okay. I sometimes don't fully understand the code that I'm approving. Put your hand up. There we go. That's more like it. All right. Very good. Exactly. Seeing this makes my day better. Wow, not a single hand. All right. How about waiting on a PR to be approved has stopped me from deploying an urgent fix? Now you're on the other side. Yeah, right? How about this one? I sometimes have to create pull requests for tiny repetitive changes. Yeah, quite a bit. So, good. It's not just me then. I see that people at least understand the pain points where I'm coming from. You are not alone. You might sometimes be sitting there at work, either waiting for your PR to be approved or having to approve someone's 700-line change PR and thinking like, why the hell am I doing this? I don't know, am I allowed to curse? No, sorry. I might curse. It's not just you. This is a sentiment that is shared by many people in the industry. And when I was looking into this talk and I was trying to do my research for it and come up with stuff to say, I found this thing called the pull request paradox, which I thought was kind of interesting because pull requests help us to advance something good. Their goal is noble, we could say. However, we still dislike them. It was explained like this. I just wrote some code that can have a positive effect on our customers, and I am motivated to release it as quickly as possible. This is true. Either I fixed a bug, or I added a new feature. I've done something that will make my product better, and I want this to be released. I need your help to review my code changes, but you are busy with your own work, and you are motivated to continue working on your own code because you are also on that first half of the paragraph. So you are making your things better, I am making my things better, and I am asking you to stop your fun work to do this slightly less fun work of reviewing my changes. So this was called this pull request paradox, and to me it was very interesting because it's very true, right? We should like them, but we don't like them. So let's see why it is that we don't like these pull requests. Let's discuss some of the issues with them, and maybe this will help us to understand why it is that they can be pain points, and maybe also find ways in which we can make them better. So one thing, and you're going to see this kind of permeates across the entire thing, right? Pull requests can easily get too big. Why? Because we start making a change, and then while we're making that change, we also see this other thing that is like, oh, I could fix this while I'm at it. And then while we're doing that, you're like, oh, you know what else would be nice to have? Let me just throw that in there real quick. And all of a sudden, you have 400 change files, and now someone's got to review this whole thing. When pull requests are too big, they lead to long review times and long merge times. And it's not just because it takes a long time for someone else to look at the code, but actually the entire cycle just takes longer. Because what happens is that I send you my code changes, and you look at these code changes, and then you give me comments on them. I'll explain this in a second, so don't worry about it too much yet. You have to look at them, which takes a while, and then you send me back your comments, and I have to look through everything that you have written because it's a bunch of things, so this is also going to take much longer. So the entire cycle, every step in this cycle just takes longer. There was a study done by this company called Graphite, and they looked at 6.8 million pull requests that they found on public repositories on GitHub. I don't know if they were public, but they were GitHub repositories. And what they found, let's see if this works. I have no idea if this will work. Well, it works on the wrong screen. So, no, I just broke everything. 1 second. Yeah, I'm not going to get too fancy then. Does this still move? Yeah, it still moves. What they found is that the average pull request on GitHub had around 900 lines that had been changed in that one pull request. And they looked also at the time that it took, both the average and the median time that it took to merge these pull requests back into the code base. So if you look at very small pull requests, like let's say these that are maybe 10 line changes, 25 line changes, these would take an average of 36 to to 40, let's say 40 hours to be merged, but actually the median was much lower. You can see the median was actually, this has to be what, about like 12, and this has to be about 16. So these were actually cycled very quickly, reviewed quickly, and incorporated quickly. However, the average ones, which were the ones with 900 lines of code that had been changed, would take about 132 hours on average to merge. Yeah, sorry, these were not, I said this number wrong. This is not 12 and 16 because this scale is funky. It's actually much less. It's about, what is that, like an hour and about 6 hours to be merged on median time. However, the much bigger ones would take much longer. If you divide that into 24-hour days, you're already talking about like 5, 6 days of work. If you divide it into 8-hour days for normal work days, you can imagine how many days these PRs are just kind of sitting there not doing anything, right? So these huge cycles of huge PRs, they just slow down the velocity of the team all across the board, right? Because these developers are waiting for days for their code to be reviewed, then the code is finally reviewed, and there is maybe, if the reviewer did a good job, there is maybe a lot of comments, a lot of things that were added to this pull request. So now the developer has to look through them all, make the necessary changes, or reply to them, do whatever is needed, and then has to send that back, and then the reviewer has to do the whole thing again, and it's just this huge dance that just takes days and days, right? There was another study done by a company called Linear B. They looked at 733,000 pull requests, 3.9 million comments, and 26,000 developers were asked about this. And they found that the average cycle time for a developer was 6 days and 5 hours. Cycle time means the time from starting to work on something, to creating the pull request, to merging this pull request, and finishing with that block of work. However, of those 6 days and 5 hours, the average pull request review time was 4 days and 7 hours. So you can see that the large majority of the time was just kind of spent on the pull request, not on actually making changes. And they found out that 33% of the pull requests were idle, 77.8% of their lifespan. Idle meaning they're not being worked on or reviewed, they're just sitting there hoping to die or hoping to be sent over to the next step, right? So this slows everything down. If I'm that developer, and this is like the beginning of this is like Monday morning, here I am hella motivated to do my work. By the end of this, I don't even remember what I was doing, you know, and it's been a boring ass week where most of the time was just spent waiting for my changes to be reviewed so I can merge them. And yes, you might say, well, but you were not just sitting there waiting, maybe you were working on something else. Yes, but at least me, I like to be done with things. I don't like to have 7 different threads open that I have to think about. I like to finish something, move on to the next thing completely, right? And you might say, okay, but at least was the quality good? The first study, the one by Graphite, found out that only 24% of 1,000 or bigger line change PRs receive any review comments. So you're telling me that 3 out of every 4 PRs with over 1,000 line changes are perfect? I don't believe this for 1 second. And we go back to the, I don't understand it, I couldn't be bothered, approve and let's hope for the best, right? So this is very closely related to this next issue. Pull requests can be hard to understand, especially when they are humongous. Right? Look at this. I just love this. 615,000 changes. It's amazing. So when PRs are too difficult to understand, what happens? At some point, I need to move on with my work, right? So this, many times, leads to what is normally called LGTM syndrome. I call it something else. I'll get to that in a second. Does anyone know what LGTM means? Looks good to me, right? Exactly. I see several hands. Looks good to me. Why? Because I see 1,000+ changes. I'm like, whatever, LGTM, move it along, right? This place I used to work at, this was in Mexico. This is probably not politically correct anymore, but we used to call these Stevie Wonder PRs. I don't know if you know Stevie Wonder. He can't see that well. So when you had a change that just needed to come through and you just did not have the time or could not be bothered to explain to someone what the change was and this was urgent, that we just needed to make this change, we actually developed this little picture, which we would send this picture and the link to the PR to whoever I was hoping would approve my PR. And it basically just meant like, just press approve, man, don't even ask me. Let's just get this over with. Because again, pull requests are difficult to understand. You have to get in the mindset of the other person and try to see what it is that they were thinking, what it is that what they decided, what they thought would be a good idea. And if it's a small thing, if it's a few changes, then yes, it's much easier to understand. But again, if this person implemented 7 different features in the one PR, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to hope that he did a good job or she did a good job, right? What's interesting, though, is that, and actually, let me go back for a second because I would have liked to mention that before. Let's go back to here. Something I thought was interesting when I was looking at this one is that, as expected, here it grows, but then it starts to go down again. It's just very strange to me. The bigger the PR gets, the actual less time it spends being reviewed and being changed. And there was this other study, there we go, went too far, let's go back. Or this is part of the graphite study, I mean, where they also looked at the average time to review per file based on the number of files that have been changed. So, if I send a PR where I change one file, the amount of time on average it was spent in review that one file was 0.91 hours, right? So let's say 50 minutes-ish. If it was 2, 3 files per file, it would take this. Once you get to 4 or 7 files, it actually would get much bigger, about 3 hours per file being reviewed. However, once you start getting higher and higher, this is interesting, the number just goes down and down. If I sent 256 to 511 file changes, every file would get looked at for about 0.05 hours, which is, I don't know, it's not even a minute, I don't think. If I sent over 1,024 files, 0. So they're not even looking at these files. They're not even clicking through them to make sure they're there, right? They're just like, whatever. So this is closely related to that whole thing. As you can see, the bigger a pull request is, the less interest there is in actually thoroughly reviewing every file and in actually spending time per file trying to make sure that the changes make sense and that they implement nicely with the other changes. So this leads to quick reviews, right? Maybe some of these are Stevie Wonder reviews. However, quick reviews, especially of such huge changes in the code base, they are going to introduce bugs. They are going to make my code base worse. There's going to be quality issues. The code base is just not going to be as good anymore. There's going to be bugs in it. My backlog is going to start growing now because there's all this other shit that needs to be fixed that was introduced because of these quick reviews. This means that now we got to do even more PRs. So if PRs was the cause of the problem, now we're doing even more of them. But now these PRs are not even introducing new features. They're actually just trying to fix some of these bugs that were generated. More bug fixes means more frustration. People don't usually, some people like doing bug fixing, but of course, we usually like developing new things instead, right? We don't love spending all of our time just fixing problems. And this means that there is just less time developing new features, which just overall makes the team feel a little bit sadder, like Steve Harvey over here. Another bit related to this process is that this process can lead to responsibility shifting, especially, again, on these huge PRs, right? So if I see a huge change, and you know what, I kind of trust my coworker. I know he or she is a good worker. I know they're a good developer. They know what they're doing. I'm going to approve it, hope for the best. The developer, on the other hand, is like, oh, well, I know Eugene. He's got a good eye for code. So he's not 100% sure of what he or she wrote, but they are trusting that my review is the quality control that this needed. So now we are both hoping that the other person was doing their job. And then, of course, neither one is. So this is great until something breaks. And then it's very easy to say, like, oh, well, you know, they introduced a change. And they can say, yeah, but you reviewed it. You said it looked OK. So whose fault is it? And, of course, we're not looking for fault. We're not trying to point fingers. But this just makes everyone feel a little bit more dead inside, right? I already feel plenty dead inside. I don't need to feel even more dead inside because of this. That was a joke, by the way. I feel great. So how is it then that we can solve these issues? And yes, you guessed it, and that's why you came here. Get rid of the damn pull request. No, wrong. I am kidding. This is not what you need to be doing necessarily. However, I do think that there is value in trying to improve things. Reviewing the processes that we do, reviewing why we do them, reviewing how we do them, and try to figure out if there is maybe a better way of doing them. And in the specific case of pull requests, I think there could be value in changing our system to a system where we, for one, we could ask ourselves, does this change need a pull request or not? What does that mean? Let's say you make some changes to your code base, and now you ask yourself the question, is a pull request needed? When would a pull request be needed? Let's say new functionality, right? You're developing a new feature. This is new stuff that has never been in the code base before. You might want to have someone else take a look at it, make sure that it looks good, that it should be implemented. You might have changes that are potentially destructive. For example, you might be working on infrastructure code, and you might have some changes in there that might destroy a database if something is wrong, right? You might be thinking that you're creating a new database, but maybe actually what you're doing is deleting the current one and creating a brand new one empty inside. So maybe these changes that could be destructive, maybe have another set of eyes look at them, right? There could also be changes that are hard to reverse. For example, if your change involves making some changes inside of the database, maybe you're changing the schema, and you say, you know, once we push this through, it's going to be quite difficult to reverse and go back to the old one if it doesn't work correctly. These kinds of things definitely get another set of eyes looking at it. Yes, this could justify a pull request. However, if there are situations where pull requests are needed, that also would imply that there are situations where pull requests are not needed, right? What would some of these situations be? Well, you guessed it, they're pretty related to the previous ones. For example, very simple or repetitive changes. Maybe you are just correcting some typos on the front end of your application. Maybe you don't need to get someone else to leave their train of thought of what they're working on to come make sure that, yes, you did indeed spell the word blue correctly. It might be changes that you do very often. Maybe you need to update some versions of some libraries. If you're updating versions of libraries and you're creating a pull request for this, I'm going to say there's a very low chance that the reviewer is going to go into every library's change file and look at the changes and decide if this is good or not for the application. Chances are they're just seeing that 5.2 went to 5.3 and they're like, okay, well, it's a number. So they're just going to prove it. Maybe something like this might not merit having a pull request. There might be also changes on which there are no other experts. I've been in this situation where I was in a project and I was the only infrastructure person. I was the only DevOps guy. So whenever I made changes to the infrastructure as code, there was no one else who even understood what I was doing because they were developers. They were working on the back end or working on the front end, whatever. They don't know what I'm doing. I don't necessarily know what they're doing. But still, this project required that every code change had to go through a PR. So I would create a pull request and then send it to one of them and be like, hey, man, can you Stevie Wonder this shit? They don't know what the change is, but they trust that I know what I'm doing. So at this point, we're just doing it because it has to be done, but there really is no benefit. Now, if this person is interested in learning, that is very different. If this is someone who actively wants to understand what this is, then by all means. But if you're just doing it just as a formality, maybe see if it is really necessary to do this. If you cannot get another expert, maybe there's no value in it. There can also be changes that are non-destructive or easily reversed. You might decide that your system is actually good enough and your testing, your automated testing is good enough that some changes can be pushed through and just rely on the testing and rely on your continuous integration to be able to catch any issues with the code in case there are any. So it might be that you decide that in your project, yes, certain code-based changes can fall under this category, and you don't necessarily need to get an entire pull request process going for those changes. Again, some ideas, right? So let's say that you decide that, yes, these changes do not require a pull request. Perfect. Wonderful. Great success. However, this doesn't mean that, like, okay, now we're just going to YOLO everything in our code base, and we're just going to, like, everyone do their own thing and hope that everything somehow works together. Try to find other solutions also that might work. For example, say that instead of making changes by myself on my computer and then putting these in a pull request and shipping them off to someone else, why not get that person to sit with me and pair program on this, work on it together? If the purpose of my pull request is for someone to learn about the code base, maybe sit with them and make them build the changes or develop the changes while you sit there and help them. I can guarantee you that if you do that, you will both understand what is happening better than if you just send it from one to the other and never actually talk about this. Now, I know it can be scary to not have your headphones on when you're developing and actually have to talk to another human. However, it is very beneficial. So I don't like it, but you know what? It works great. So sometimes I have to do it. However, let's say that you figure out that, yes, a pull request is actually needed. I do need to put this in a PR. Well, don't worry. Do not despair. It's not the end of the world. However, when you make this thing, keep it small. If anything, over the past 36 minutes, you've seen how big PRs are basically what destroys PRs, right? So just keep them small. But you might say, well, but this feature I'm developing is actually quite big. It touches on very many different files, and it is a lot of different changes. How can I keep it small? You can do something that is called stacking your PR, or your change, I should say. So you look at your entire change, this feature you're developing, and you try to figure out how can I break it down into parts that can stack on top of each other. Say that you're developing, I don't know, you're making some changes where a new API is created, and this API talks to a database in the background, and then this makes some changes and so on. Why not do each of these things individually? Maybe just create the API. Don't do anything on the database side yet. Just create the API, put that in a pull request, ship it off. Once that is merged, now build on top of that. Now say, okay, this API, which is already in my main code base, is going to now do this on the database and make those changes. So find a way in which you can stack these changes so that you can break them into small PRs. Because this is a little bit similar to the whole, you know, if one woman can make a baby in 9 months, can 9 women make a baby in 1 month? You know, this is a similar thing. The amount of time that each individual small PR is going to take is not equal to if you just shipped everything together into one giant-ass PR. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to take much less time, but the quality is not going to be great, or it's going to take much longer for the same amount of quality. You can do this also by means of short-lived branches, if you're familiar with those. Don't have a branch that you break off from your main, and then you're like on that branch for weeks or months, and then it's a mega pain in the ass to try to merge it back. Create a new branch, have it live for a day or two, make some small changes, merge it right back. Use feature toggles if necessary. Toggles that can be turned on and off so that any incomplete changes don't show up in your final application. Use these tricks to just kind of make the whole thing easier and more streamlined. Try to keep your PRs to no more than 200 change lines. ideally 50. As you saw in one of the graphs, this makes the quality actually and the time spent per file and looking at the changes better. Don't make them don't say, well, the average is 900, so I'm going to do 900. Do not do that. Keep them small. And also make your pull requests attractive. Now, what does this mean? They say you cannot put lipstick on a pig. Still a pig, right? But once you create this PR, try to see how can I get someone to want to look at my PR. You should remember that PRs have a buyer and a seller, right? You're the seller, and the buyer is the person you are hoping will look at your PR and be happy about looking at this PR. So when you create this PR, provide valuable information. I've worked at places where they just had a channel on Slack or on Teams, which they just called PRs, and every time any developer had something that needed reviewing, they would just put a link to it there, and then hope for the best. If I'm looking at a channel and I see that come in, I'm going to pretend I didn't see it and hope someone else picks it up. Because who knows, maybe I click on it and it's a tiny change, but maybe I click on it and it is a humongous change. And now I've looked at it, so now I kind of have to do it. So when you provide this PR to someone else, give them information in the moment so that they know what they are up against. For example, you could say how many files have changed. You could tell them, okay, here is a PR where 5 files have been changed. Kind of related to that, you could say how many lines have changed, right? 40 changed lines. You could also say what issue this is related to. You could say this solves this ticket, or this fixes this bug, or this is related to this new feature. You could also say, this is kind of nice, when are you available to discuss it? Sometimes people will send a PR, and then like, all right, I'm off for 2 hours to drink a coffee. And then if someone is picking it up right there and they might have a question, they have to do the whole song and dance of, type it and send it and hope that you look at it when you come back, and then back and forth. It just takes so long, right? Maybe it's easier to say, here's this, and I'm available the next 2 hours if you have any questions. Shoot them directly. Walk over or send me a message, Let's make this more streamlined. Also, how urgent is this? Is this something that needs to go out this week? Is it something that is not as urgent? So if you have something more urgent that you're working on, finish that and then look at my PR. This is valuable information that is going to help your reviewer decide if and when they can get to it. Here's an example I saw online. This was kind of cool. It's a very simple system, but as you can see, the message here, please review my code. I need it for today's release. Okay, that tells me the urgency. And I can see how big it is. 3-minute review time, I like it. 4 files, perfect. 34 lines, hell yeah. Let's do this. 3 commits, easy. I know that when I go into this, I'm not going to be sucked into a 3-day-long process of reviewing something, and I'm going to fall behind on my sprint goals. So when you make your PR, think, would I like to would I like to buy my own PR? Is it attractive, right? If it was you receiving this PR from someone else with that information, would you want to do it? If yes, then okay, you're doing something right. And don't say yes because well, yes, of course, because I built this feature and it's great. No, say yes because yes, it does look attractive. It's simple. They will not be hating me when they go to review this stuff. So yeah, this issue is divisive. Here's a review I got last time I did this talk. This talk was clearly made by somebody focusing on the wrong part of the problem and without focus on different types of critical systems. Thank you, anonymous reviewer. I love you too. This is something that is divisive because every project is different. Someone sitting here today might be thinking, yes, this is actually exactly the problems we have, and yes, some of these things could help us make it better. Some other of you might be thinking, no, our process is perfect, and no, we're not getting rid of pull requests, and who the hell are you? What's your problem? But that is not the point necessarily. I didn't come here to tell you all of you should do the exact same thing that I said because I'm the guy with the microphone. No, my point for you today is to review why you do things. Question everything. And when I say everything, I don't mean question if the earth is flat, but question everything you do at work. The things you do, the processes you do, the different whatever traditions that you have in your team, why do you do them? Especially for long-running projects, it can be many times that whenever something was implemented, you were not there, so you don't know the decision-making that was behind it or the reasoning behind it. It might be that when you join this team, oh, we do this like this, okay. But question it, ask why do we do it, and is there a better way of doing it? You might find out that, no, this is still the best solution. Okay, great. We do pull requests for everything because reasons. Okay, wonderful. But it might be that when you question this, other people say like, actually, you have a good point. Like, we hadn't thought about this, or this is also pain points that we were having. How can we make this better? So this goes for pull requests. This goes for stand-up meetings. This goes for any ritual you have or any process you do. From time to time, go back and look at, does it still hold value? Maybe it had value when it started, but as the project has evolved, does it still have the same value it had back then? And if not, can we make it more valuable? So if you still completely disagree, you can come yell at me after. I'll be walking around. You can also yell at me on my socials, which you will find on my website, which is this one here. If you want to find these slides, I also have them there. And these are the sources I use for some of the graphs and so on. The first one also has a really cool checklist of things that you can use to make your pull request look better when you are sending it to someone else. So if you want to check that out. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me today.
Okay, thank you so much. So if you have to question everything, then we are waiting.
Now, I am not the pull request master. However, I might have ideas. I see like 3 hands in the back.
Yeah, so obviously I didn't have a chance to peek at the sources yet.